I just had the most unusual dream. I dreamt that I was King Afonso in the Portuguese Empire in the 1300s. I had three lovely kids. Well, two beautiful daughters and one idiot of a son. It's all so hazy, but I remember the idiot getting involved in an extramarital love affair with a lady named Ines, and eventually impregnating her behind the family's back, bringing an enormous amount of disgrace to both him and to the entire lineage. I decided enough was enough, and I had her assassinated. It was the only way. That bastard of a son refused to accept my rule and rose up in rebellion, ultimately ending up in civil war, which I naturally crushed with unrelenting force. And then I died and woke up. Fortunately, it was all a dream. How's it, everyone, and welcome back to part 3. So, as you've probably gathered, disaster has struck. The new patch 1.1 came out earlier today, after I'd posted the first/second episode of the series, and unfortunately, as I went to try and film more content for the playthrough, the game had broken. So, in my view, I had two options. I could roll back to the previous version and carry on with the playthrough, or I could cut my losses and accept that it was all a dream. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run through it again from the beginning. We're still going to go with the same pacing, slow, purposeful gameplay, but obviously the first episode, the episode that you'll probably already have seen covering the first year, I will just go quite quickly through that because you've already seen it before, and we can have a look at some of the new features, new mechanics, etc. Alright, so just before we jump in, I just wanted to quickly talk through some of the new visual features that we've got in the game. First things first, push the wrong button immediately, we've got a reworked roads map. Now, still has the brown to symbolise the gravel roads, but very, very neat new line demonstrating where the roads are actually connected to. Alright, next up, perhaps the most exciting one for me anyway, is the rivers map mode. This was initially given, then taken away, and then given back to us now that it works. The benefit of that is that places on a river will get production bonuses, food capacity, etc. So this is really important for helping to understand where we're going to be looking to develop and how we're going to grow over time as well. And then finally, lastly, we've got peasant enfranchisement. This is effectively a representation of how much of the wealth share of a location belongs to the commoners, the rest is transferred to the nobility. So I'm not entirely sure how useful this is going to be, but we're going to have a look through it as we play. It is largely driven by the location rank. You can see here that most of the cities and towns are greater for income equality, I would suggest. And I suppose that kind of makes sense because towns tend to be slightly more egalitarian, even in today's times. So for those of you who watched the first episode, I've decided just to speed this up and talk through the process so that you're not watching the same footage twice. Very quickly, we set up Afonso as the leader of the Navy because it supports a naval focus in terms of the values, and we set up Pedro as leader of the army just to push that crown power as we discussed in the first episode. Next, we had a little mess around with the budget, so I was just talking through how I'm going to manually mess around with the equilibrium for the estates, and also I cut back on most of our expenditure with respect to the army, the navy, and also forts. We haven't had any trades go through, but we're running a deficit. Speaking of trades, I've cancelled all of the automatic trades and set up some manual ones just to start. Pedro we married to Elizabeth of England, same as before, and then we just had a quick look at whether Castile were friendly. In terms of technology, we did the same thing, organised religion followed by guilds, and in terms of cabinet actions, again, same story, just justifying the fact that even though there's no threat of jihad in this patch, the population is still going to be really unhappy being Sunni in a Catholic country, so the conversion effort makes sense. And likewise, we also are pushing towards centralisation with our cabinet members. With our youngest daughter Leonor, we stuck with a balanced education, and in terms of rivals, we declared on the three North African nations, same as last time. They are rivaled with Castile, so makes sense. In terms of the mission, we stuck with an economic focus, and we were just talking through what we needed to do, which led us to looking at the privileges. And again, same as last time, we removed market fares and we gave them building rights as well as urban development grants, thereby supporting the growth of the burger social class. That pretty much brings you back up to speed, so on with the gameplay. So that's it for the initial steps. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spend a bit of time looking at the market, looking at my buildings. I've just had a thought actually. I need to remove some of these forts to try and address the budget problems. So we looked at this in the first episode. We're going to get rid of Elvas to start with. We're going to get rid of Vienna to start with. I'm tempted to get rid of another one, to be honest. But it does heavily depend on whether Castile are going to be mates with us or not. It's getting better. I'm going to take a bit of a gamble on it and accept that Castile are probably going to be our friends. So to try and push that further, I'm going to profess trust for now. You can see that that's immediately given them the incentive to accept our alliance. We just don't have enough diplomats. So in a couple of months, what's that? Yeah, next month we should have enough to get an alliance. So yeah, like I said, I'm now going to spend a bit of time just looking through a few things, probably in a bit more granular detail. I'll passively narrate. I don't know whether it makes sense to keep most or any of the footage in, because I think there's going to be a lot of looking at things and just experimenting with things and so on. Okay, so the 100 Years' War has just fired. I'm not going to read this again, because I read it the first time, but hopefully the war will be over quickly. If I look at war, are they actually at war yet? No. So we'll keep an eye on this, just see what's going on over time. Oh, another event. Controversial protectionist. Since our advisors started influencing the trade developments in Portugal, internal trade has been strengthened at the cost of curtailed imports and increased state regulation. While the advisors' decisions to improve infrastructure have been appreciated, recent suggestions have caused many influential people to question their philosophy. Detractors argue that the king is taking their advisors' advice too readily, and that we should look for mutually beneficial deals with other nations rather than seeking to dominate every area of trade. So we have the option of losing some legitimacy, which is not ideal at the moment because we've just spent a bunch giving away some privileges, or losing 5 prestige, which is also not ideal. I think it's arguably better to get rid of the legitimacy because we've got a passive uptick of legitimacy. We don't of prestige, and I find prestige is quite hard to accumulate, so we will take the legitimacy hit. Their methods have helped us so far. So I've done a little bit of trading, and I just wanted to talk through some of the rationale and the decision making. So we have a surplus of fish and we have a surplus of wine. So I've decided to try and export some of that, both to increase the profit or the profitability of the RGOs in our own market, and also to try and just make a bit of money. Likewise, we have a shortage of... Oh, I actually haven't imported anything except for some fruit, but we do have a shortage of wool, we have a shortage of fine cloth, it's very expensive. So, in terms of trades, I've got a bit of silver, just because that will help with the minting. It's still terrible though, actually, now that I look at it. I don't even know if this is working. Looks like the market balance is 0, so I don't think we will get this. But we can try. Exporting a little bit of leather, exporting wine, exporting fish, and importing a bit of fruit just to increase the satisfaction. So this is the only non-profitable trade, but I think our people need it from looking at the shortage here. So in terms of RGOs, I'm just going to build up the legumes like we did last time, but it's close to the capital, control is high, and there is a decent amount of demand for it because it's food. So yeah, look, we don't have enough supply, so that's good. We're going to build a dye factory. What's it called? Tailor's Guild. We're going to build a Tailor's Guild in the capital, and we're going to build another one just by way of testing it in Evora. I don't know if they've changed this, but you normally get a production bonus if you have the input good in the same province as the production building. So we'll increase the export of wine and leather, our two most profitable industries. We also need to increase the supply of leather over time. because it looks like the stockpile's quite short. So let's look at that now. We'll increase. Don't know if you can search it directly like this. You can. So where might be the most profitable? Santarém. Why has it got a production bonus? Because of tools, because of livestock, lack of sand. So I think they have reworked it with respect to the RGO being in the province. But to be honest, this is probably a better way of approaching it by looking at the market rather than just the local area. But anyways, we will build it up in Santarém. And then I think we are probably okay to increase to speed 2 or 3. Not much is going on at the moment. I'm going to spend a bit of time just looking at things, and I'll probably jump back in when there's something of importance to talk about. Okay, so one important thing or quick thing I've noticed, it looks like it is true that you do get it from the province as well. So the wine RGO in Minho compounds upon the fact that you've got loads of extra things. So it still does make sense to build within areas that have the local RGO. So we're going to build a Distillers Guild in Porto. Okay, so people of Torres Novas despair as measles spreads throughout the area. This is not good. Where's Torres Novas? Oh, it's very close. So we probably want to try and address this. Prosperity overall is not good, basically. So anytime there's a lack of prosperity, as we can see here, it just basically hamstrings the province. So what we'll do for now is we will flip over to recovery efforts. Oh, this is terrible. Flip over to recovery efforts. It shouldn't take very long, and then we can flip it back to the conversion effort. We can see a little cyclone pottering about here. Wow, it's all the way up. Hello. So we've got the alliance from Castile. Absolutely, we're going to accept this. That's fantastic. So that's what we were aiming for, really. Almost feels a little bit better that they are the ones asking us. I also noticed that someone's at war here. Who is this? Aquitaine versus Comminges. Oh, France is at war with Aquitaine. Oh, is this the English? Yeah, okay, so this is the 100 Years' War. So let's have a look now, I suppose. They have much less men. So on a one-to-one basis, if they're losing a similar amount of men, which they are, it's just going to be a bit of a stomping. But we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. Okay, so I'm just going to look through some of these unprofitable buildings and see if there's anything we can do to correct them. So first and foremost, it looks like the naval supply guilds are relatively unproductive. Now, why might that be? If we hover over it, we can see that one of the goods is really expensive, tar. So maybe we just make an effort to try and build some tar kilns somewhere. Now, if we go by production efficiency, Faro's probably the place, because what we want to do is we want to build it somewhere where there's decent productivity. I'm not too concerned about profit for now, but what I am concerned about is having enough people to work the building. Now, this isn't the entire amount. I think it needs 1,000 people. Oh, it needs 250. So we could build it in Faro and it would be able to immediately populate. So we're definitely going to do that. Okay, so now that we are making a bit of money, we can start to think about spending some of the capital we have accumulated already. Now, some of the best things I think we can do is just try to propel the economy a bit more forward. So we're going to have a look. Again, this is probably where I'm going to skip forward, but we're going to have a look and see what sort of things our market has an appetite for, what our neighbouring markets, for example Burgos, Sevilla and maybe Faz, what they desire, and we can maybe try and be the market that supplies them with, for example, leather, I think is short here, so furniture. So maybe if they can't produce furniture, or at least can't produce a large amount of furniture, we lean into that. Good way to think about that maybe is looking at what sort of RGOs they have. So they've got a very limited amount of lumber, whereas we have a lot more lumber. So I think maybe trying to lean into that and mass produce almost a bunch of furniture is a clever play. So yeah, so I'm going to build a furniture manufactory, or whatever the hell it's called, in Viseu. Carpenters Guild. So we have lumber in Beira Alta, we have lumber in the local market, We don't have enough dyes, which is going to be a detractor, but we're never going to have enough dyes. And we've got enough tools, so we do need to make sure that we keep the production of tools high. But this is a relatively good place to build, I believe. So we'll do that. One thing to mention is that I am trying to build, for the most part, along a place that is connected to our capital. The reason for that is overall the control is just generally better. We can see that there is generally better control along the road connected areas. We do want to build southerly, just because the terrain's better and the overall climate, forgetting my buttons now, the overall climate is better, which means that, I mean, it's marginal, but it does mean that the south provinces are going to be slightly better to build on. Okay, transferring University of Coimbra. We saw this last time. I can't remember, to be completely honest, what was in episode 2 and what wasn't. So the main question really is whether we want to move the university to Lisboa and implement the Estudo Geral in Lisboa. We want to do this because it pushes centralization, and a university is generally better for population, attraction, growth, literacy, so on and so forth. So having it in our capital just makes sense. So we're going to pick this option here. Also, the recovery effort's finished, so we're going to swap this guy back to the conversion effort. Wow, so in those short couple of months, we've actually converted Extremadura more than our least converted province. We are going to stick with Extremadura because it's got more people than Algarve, and it is more centrally located by way of comparison to our capital. So we'll stick with that for now. We can see that in the background there is a growing rebellion among the Sunni zealots, so even though there's no threat of jihad, I think there is an argument to try and address this, because over time the civil war will erupt. So we do want to deal with the Sunni threat, effectively. I'm just going to slow it down real quick because we've had a few things come through. So diplomatic actions, I need to have a think about what exactly we're going to do. I think currying favours with Castile makes sense. It's on a one-to-one basis, so I'm happy with that. I don't know what else to do with it, so I might just let it tick up a second whilst I have a think about where it makes sense to prioritise geopolitically. So yeah, we're going to build the wool in Porto Alegre. It's going to take ages for them to fully occupy or fully employ, but I do think it makes sense to try and start building up our local resources rather than just relying on a permanent import. Likewise, I think lumber is probably worth keeping low all the time, so we'll probably increase lumber here in Torres Novas. And then what else have we got? I think that's probably it by way of RGOs for now. Maybe we improve lumber as well in Viseu. The reason for doing that is because we've got a carpenter's guild coming through, so if we have greater production of lumber in this area, this is going to be a really fantastic area to build furniture and any wood producing industries. So we're just going to stick with that. I think just keep bumping this up. It's also quite good for a distillery, I can see here, because we've got lots of wine in the province. It's quite an interesting province actually, because it's 3 wine, 3 lumber, and then a bit of wool and livestock. Okay, so otherwise we're also going to build up some of the resources in Porto and in Lisboa. We're just going to try and make sure that we constantly have our burghers employed, because they're a really useful social class to be working. Just looking at this here. Okay, so this is actually... what is going on here? I'm not entirely sure I understand what this is, if I'm honest. I'll have a look at that in just a second. Dubious spending practices. Nicolao's been a bit naughty. Nicolao's spending habits have raised some eyebrows. He has been spending large amounts of money, far larger than one in his position should have access to, distributing gifts to the local burghers in his home region and improving the local infrastructure. That doesn't sound too bad. An investigation has revealed the facts. Rather than serving the king to the best of his abilities, Nicolao has been funneling state funds to Evora in order to boost his popularity there. While this has been a boon to the local economy, such practices could prove damaging to the state as a whole, if tolerated. Now, we have a bit of a conundrum here. We do not, as far as I understand it, have anyone else who can work in the cabinet. So, getting rid of him, who's arguably okay, he's not fantastic, but he's okay, is a problem. So he's kind of got us bent over a barrel here, so we're probably just going to turn a blind eye, because if we get rid of him, we can't replace him. So the legitimacy hit is painful, however. What we're going to do for now is we're going to boost our spending on the cost of the court to try and bump up our legitimacy. Generally speaking, it's always good to try and get this as high as possible, because it means that people are less likely to rebel and your crown power is increased over time. So we will, I think if we max it, it'll be very expensive, but we'll maybe just get it to 1 a month. Tell you what, we'll do 90.9. Does really eat into our cost, but hopefully we can get this bumped up over time and then we can reduce the expenditure. I think it's worth going for a push to carpentry, so we're going to do that. So we have got a few provinces that do have lumber, and I do think Faz is going to be a great place to export furniture to. Plus I think furniture, a produced good, is probably more valuable than anything else, or more valuable than just pure legumes or something like that, so I think that makes sense. Alright, so we've managed to find 2 trades for gold and silver. I'm hoping this will mean that our minting becomes more efficient. It might not be sustainable, but useful by way of, I don't know, getting precious metals, I suppose, which is always in heavy demand. Okay, so the trade's ticked over. We can only get 58.58 of gold, so we've dropped that down, and we can't get the silver, so we'll get rid of the silver. We'll try and maybe see if we can source it from somewhere else. Same time, we now have organized religion, so that's good. Okay, so we've had an event pop up. Treaty of Tagilde. Tagilde? I don't know how you say that. A diplomatic opportunity has arisen to secure a long-lasting peace and potential ally. England, wary of isolation, has proposed a treaty that could aid in asserting our independence against interference from Castile. That seems good. What happens though? Well, we already have an alliance with Castile. We gain 3 trust of the Kingdom of England. Castile loses 75 opinion of the Crown of Portugal, Kingdom of Portugal. I think it's okay to sign it, because we're already in alliance with them. This could be a bad idea, but we'll go with it. I think it makes sense. They're still pretty happy with us, so I think it's okay. We do want to make sure that we are buttressed against them deciding to get a bit greedy as well, particularly because we've destroyed some of these forts. Speaking of, I think we can get rid of a couple more forts to try and keep our costs down. The only one I'm really happy with is Braganza. Happy with getting rid of is Braganza, so we'll get rid of Braganza. The Burghers of Viseu. The Burghers of Viseu, an increasingly important trading town, have approached the king today, asking to be granted greater powers in order to make the region thrive without the hindrance of many of our normal taxes. Should we provide them with these means to grow, they assure us that the economy of that area would quickly improve, resulting in more wealth for the state. So they get greater power, but they get greater overall satisfaction. I think we're happy to accept it. It's a bit annoying that they get extra power, but that pushes them up to 50. And then we can maybe start looking at doing something with privileges again. So we'll accept it. So we have a few decisions to make diplomatically. So I'm going to have a look through this and then I'm going to narrate what makes the most sense to do. Okay, so main thing, I think, I've had a look at everything. I think the only real things that have any benefit for now is improving opinion. So we'll improve with England, we'll improve with France. It's just a way of insulating against any Castilian aggression. I know we've got an alliance with them, but just in case something happens, maybe a special event or something, well then hopefully we can try and get one of these guys on side and help defend us, or at least get a guarantee of independence, something like that. Otherwise, we have had our first Cortes Gerais, which is basically a parliament. Now, my understanding is it's always best to try and do it in your capital if you are pushing centralization. By doing it in your capital, you push towards centralization over time. So we're going to do that. And what are we going to pick? Let's have a look. Yeah, so having looked at it, I think promote urbanization probably makes the most sense. Pop promotion speeds increased by 100%. That improves the chances of us getting those wool locations working. This is just whilst it's being debated. But also, it converts something to a town, which is quite cheap compared to paying for it manually. Just out of interest, if we look at it here and we were to try and push it to a town, it costs 400 gold. By doing it manually, via the parliament, I think it's free. So that's fantastic. So we just need to make sure that it actually does pass now. Now what are we going to do? Traditional economy we don't really want to push. We could give them powerful dioceses. I don't know how you say that word. I think that's probably okay to give them. Possible towns and cities, 10% growth. Yeah, I think this is probably okay. What contract here do we have? Navy maintenance, cheaper, shipbuilding speed 20%. I'm happy to give them this as well, to be honest. So given that we need how much? We need 22. So we probably need to give them at least that one. Oh, I almost clicked that by accident. So conservative backlash. Our clergy do not feel that the Kingdom of Portugal is properly sticking to the principles of divine supremacy. We have heard them condemning the government. Well, we don't really want to take the stability hit, so we will take the legitimacy hit and move towards innovative. I think innovative over time is better anyway, so it's fine. It's just idle talk. Shut the hill up. We've given them the privilege. Probably need to give someone something else. Maybe to insure against it. I was happy to give them shipwrights, so we'll probably give them this as well. Now this is going to really irritate the nobility, but when a parliament's in session, they actually have a significantly increased growth or satisfaction change. So this shouldn't be too much of a problem, particularly because the parliament's got a bit of time to run. So I think for the moment things are relatively stable, so it might be that we cut it here for now and just cut forward to when something interesting happens, but I'll keep playing and see if I can find anything interesting to talk about. Okay, so we've just had the second task or mission pull through because we've given them enough privileges. So I think we can just confirm that. Task fulfilled. Boom. I think we've got the next one, grow the burgers. So we get a change towards capital economy. Boom. That's great. Embracing the capital economy. This task will take 365 days to complete. Happens instantly. Monthly events about our attempts to embrace the capital economy. Our state has lived off the ideals of traditional economy in the past, however these methods are not sufficient for a prosperous future, and as such we shall embrace the modern ideas of capital economy. So we'll do that. I think every month we'll start to get an event. Otherwise we're going to start using our money to just keep improving the industries that we have a need to grow. So I'm just going to have a look and see what we need really. We're actually just short on a lot of basic goods. You know what, it might not be a bad shout to actually have a dye maker. Start producing dyes in our own right. Because we're importing dyes to try and support some of the productions, such as the Tailors Guild. So actually having dyes feeding into the Tailors Guild I think makes sense. Let's do that. So the legumes are fully built. We're going to increase that again. I think maybe it was a wrong play because we're actually quite short on labourers, but I think it's okay for now. Alright, so we're going to have a quick look at maritime presence just to see how this is pushing along. It looks terrible here actually. It's growing, but it's bad. Otherwise it's somewhat improving, is it? No, it's actually going down. Why is that? We do have the Navy patrolling. Maybe it's just not very effective. So we might want to put a bit of money into improving the Navy because we do really want to get the coastline secure. So that's the next thing, I think. Let's build a couple ships that are going to support the navy. Oh cool, so this has been slightly reworked. I think this maybe indicates that they're unique. I'm not sure. Basically, all we really care about is what ships have the best maritime presence increase. So this is point 10, this is point 8. I think it's okay to just really go for the Caravel. It's an age 1 unit, so it might be crap compared to everything else that comes through over time. But for now, I think it's okay to build 1, 2, 3. Once they build, we'll add them to the fleet, and then that should hopefully try and keep pushing up this maritime presence. A bit tight on cash, to be honest. Castile calls for help. The conflict over the Strait of Gibraltar seems to heat up once more, and an envoy of Castile has reached our court to ask for an alliance to repel the Sunni armies once more in glorious battle. Well, from a role-playing element, we're obviously going to join them. Is this going to pull us into a war? No. That's a shame. I'm sort of looking forward to doing a bit of battle. Are they even at war? No. Missed a trick there, I think. Patronage of Lisboa. In line with our ambitions to centralise wealth and economic power, local authorities in Lisboa have submitted a proposal for large-scale investment. Sounds good so far. They argue that improved infrastructure and expanded mercantile hubs would transform the city into a cornerstone of the economy of our kingdom. Yes, agreed. The required funds are considerable, but the potential returns, both economic and political, are even greater. Advisors suggest acting swiftly to cement this development as part of our broader push toward a capital-centered economy. Okay, I think this is fine. This is more than reasonable. Okay, we lose 50 gold, but we've got a little bit of a stockpile at the moment. Pushes towards capital economy. Development really is this key thing. And if we just have a look at the prosperity, so we can see prosperity is going up, but having high prosperity is giving all of these benefits as well. So yeah, absolutely, we're going to go for it. Okay, Extremadura resists urbanization. Why would you do that? Our efforts to encourage urban growth in Extremadura have been met with considerable resistance. Local customs and leadership push back against reforms, wary of change and fearful that increased bureaucracy will erode their autonomy. While no open defiance has emerged, the slowdown is noticeable. Urban planners and administrators complain of obstruction, delays, and lack of cooperation. This may be the first sign of deeper resistance to our urban-oriented policies. Some friction is expected, irritates some of the Catholic peasants, and stone mines get less employment, hinders our capital economy, and this pushes us towards traditional economy. I think it's better to just expect some friction. It will annoy some people, but short-term pain for long-term gain. Okay, so the Cortes Gerayes agrees, Viana becomes a town. It didn't cost us any money, so that's a really good thing, and also helps make people a bit more happy, so that's good. We're just going to mess around with some trades, but I might give a recap once I've actually looked at everything. Okay, so all we've done really is set up a small trade for some fruit. We want to try and just keep the general needs satisfied. I think fruit is one of those staple goods that will really piss people off if we don't have it. Out of interest, let's have a look at the Tailors Guild here. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with wool. I wonder if we change this over to wool, we do get the bonus. So I wonder if it's better to produce wool, use wool to produce fine cloth in this province just for the bonus, although it has now picked up a massive problem. The production efficiency is just better because we're using cloth rather than wool. But theoretically that logic makes sense. Overall, things are progressing pretty well. Not much else to report on. Geopolitically, we might start thinking about whether we want to start getting involved down here. I don't know. Maybe we could start to ruffle some feathers on the North African coast. For now, I think we just want to make sure that we're running a positive balance, starting to really get as much money as possible. With a amount of gamer foresight, I know at some point those rats are going to start coming off the ship and that's going to cause us a problem. But for now, we have an event. Rural folk left behind. As our policies increasingly favour urban hubs and commercial centres, rural voices grow restless. In Extremadura, village councils complain of rising levies, neglected development, and the migration of youth toward the cities. The contrast between bustling urban markets and quiet, forgotten farmlands grows sharper by the day. Some within our court argue this is an inevitable outcome of modern growth. Others warn that unchecked neglect may harden into rebellion. Such is the price of progress. Our progress towards capital economy will not be hindered, or we cannot let our rural settlements dwindle. So, to help us decide what we want to do, we just want to quickly look at the comparison between capital economy versus traditional economy. Capital economy generally focused on earning money, whereas traditional economy focused on living off what the land provides. Now, in the early game, it's providing the food and the income that we need from our local provinces is the right thing to do, but we do want to start pushing towards this just because we want to start producing more goods, which we can then trade out. So things like the Carpenters Guild that I mentioned earlier. So I think basically it's a long-winded way of saying that we will accept people being a little bit irritated at us for the price of progress. Hello, hello. Look who it is. Inés de Castro. She looks different this time. She was wearing a funny little hat before. Well, she looks different. So, one of the Castilian courtiers, Inés de Castro, is back. She is basically moving in and she's going to try and seduce Pedro. So it looks like we are going to follow the same path as before and potentially have a civil war. Okay, so some of the things that I'm just going to look through, I'm probably just going to be relatively quick through this. I might narrate it and just chop things together, but I'm going to start building up some of the towns, start using some of the capacity of the burghers. I'll start with Lisbon first because it's got the highest control. We'll move to, what's this called? Santarém, and then probably Porto, and so on and so forth. So let's have a look. Okay, so one thing I've noticed is that it automatically seems to pick certain things. For some reason, it started to pick using fiber crops to make the cloth. But in reality, what we actually want to do is we want to use the wool in the local province. Note how the production efficiency massively changes. In fact, it obviously makes it a profitable building from an unprofitable one. But we're going to do this, and now this is part of the new patch. We can lock the production method in this specific building, which is what we want to do. We want Evora to always use wool because there is wool in the province. There's wool in this province, so we'll always get a decent amount of this bonus. And then we just need to try and build upon this wool over time once we've got the population there. Okay, so I've decided one of the things we are going to do for Lisbon is we're going to increase the amount of scriptoriums. The benefit of that is we have a lot of unemployed clerics, so they don't draw on this burgher workforce. And I was just looking at building a library, and we don't have enough books. So books is going to be important in order to make sure that our peasants aren't stupid. So we can build this up by 1. I'm not sure exactly how many books I need, so we build it up by 1 for now. And we'll keep an eye on it. Santarém, let's have a look. So we've got about 200 burghers. And we could build a winery. What sort of things are the most profitable and productive? Distillers Guild is quite productive. I think we can do a Distillers Guild as well in here because of the wine, so we get a local bonus. Now, Visu, I think it's probably worth pushing the Furniture or the Carpenter Guild. It does have a bonus for the Tailors Guild because we've got wool. Okay. Decisions. Okay, guilds have been researched, so we need to pick a new technology. So that's kind of forcing my hand to make a decision here. I'm just going to improve the Carpenters Guild here for now. So in terms of research, God's sake. Temporary insanity of King Afonso. So this is obviously not going to be good. King Afonso has been acting very strangely the last couple of months. It appears that his most faithful magistrate is suffering from a temporary crisis of insanity. As a result, our kingdom is left with very little efficient guidance. So we can pick one of the things that we can reduce: admin, diplo, or military. Now I'm just trying to think through what makes the most sense. So what's actually reduced? Geez, so everything goes down. 30, 10, 10. What do they actually impact? So let's have a look, make a decision what it actually impacts. So diplo is, I don't know why I started in the middle. Admin we want to keep high because of the crown power. So admin's off the table. Diplo, estate satisfaction is decent. I think military is fine. So we'll reduce his military, even though it's unpleasant to do so. So one of the things we do want to look at really is trying to connect these lower provinces. You can get, oh, I haven't picked a complete technology. Let's do that. So cost of purchasing food I think makes sense. Our merchants have established connections to rural settlements within and beyond our borders. They are able to secure better prices for food than would otherwise be expected. Okay, so this popped. We embraced the capital economy. We got trade focus. I think we got to pick that, so that was good. So yeah, okay, so you get to pick what you're doing. We did want to do trade, and now we have the next two. So Portugal has greater or equal to 16.22 total trade capacity in Lisboa. If we do that, we get extra trade capacity. So we can do that. If we just look at our trading, how much do we actually have? 10. So all that is simply is let's build some marketplaces. So you may or may not remember from me saying it before, but you can build a marketplace in any town or city. If I hover over this here, you can see that it can be built in either a city or a town. Now, the reason for mentioning this is that you might feel inclined to build it in Lisboa because it's your capital, etc. But the benefits itself are not dependent on your control or your proximity to the capital. So there's an argument to build them in some of your far away towns because you still get the exact same benefits as long as it's fully employed. So if we look at Vienna, there's not enough people there to actually employ it, right? So that's a drawback. How many people does it employ? 250. So we could look at doing it in Coimbra, which we're going to do. We could look at doing it in Porto, which we'll probably do, or Faro. What's the control difference? So we'll build it in Faro, and then that's all our money. What that will do is it will give us trade advantage, 1 extra trade capacity, so we'll get an extra 2, and that pushes us nicely along to that 16. So it'll take a couple of months, but once we get there, we should get a bonus for that. So in terms of unprofitable buildings, it has come down a little bit now, which is good. The Spinners Guild in Porto is not doing so hot. So let's just have a quick peek at that and see why that might be. Because we don't have enough wool. So we do really desperately need to get the wool sorted. We can't do anything for now, we don't have enough money. So we're going to have to just basically spend a couple of months dealing with our cash. So this will probably be a good time to jump cut because nothing much is going to happen. I'm going to up the speed. If anything exciting happens, I will be in touch. Okay, I've noticed now, because we don't have gold or silver, we're not able to mint at all, which is terrible. That's why we're losing, well, why we're not making so much money. So I'm going to see if I can try and get gold or silver. Spain is bloody holding on to it, hoarding their gold and silver, which is quite frustrating. Oh! He's dead. Afonso is dead. With our ruler dead, it is time to prepare his burial, as the hallways of the royal palace fill with weeping sounds. While he was clear about his desire to be buried in the Alcobaçal monastery, little more instructions are known about how to proceed. A too Spartan burial could give a bad image to the kingdom, but a too spectacular one can ruin our finances for more pressing matters. Let's have a quick read of this, but I won't read it all. The monastery, founded in 1153, was the burial site for Portuguese monarchs for centuries. It is also considered the most important monastery during the Middle Ages. Gosh, it's going to be expensive, but I do think we pay for it. King Afonso is, well, he was a bit insane towards the end, but he was a good lad. He was a nice, competent ruler, and we are now dealing with his moron of a son. So let's send him off to Valhalla, or whatever the Portuguese people call Valhalla, heaven, I suppose, because they're Catholics, with grace. So ends the reign of King Afonso, a ruler of undeniable talent who somehow managed to leave the smallest of footprints. He now passes the flame to young 20-year-old Pedro, a successor from whom much is expected, but who possesses tragically little by way of actual ability. Alfonso's legacy is one of minor adjustments rather than ground shifts. His most notable achievement, transferring the University of Coimbra back to the capital Lisboa. His later years were clouded by a bout of military insanity, yet he remained head of the navy, conducting useless military drills along the Iberian coastline until his final breath at age 50. There is a final, bitter irony to his end. Afonso spent his life as an embezzler, and in death he stayed true to form. His funeral expenses drained the very last of the Portuguese coffers. He leaves behind an empty treasury, a confused kingdom, and a young man entirely unprepared for the weight of the crown. And so begins the era of Pedro de Borgoña.